What's it like to witness a genocide? My name is Kafuide. Welcome to History Time. April 1994 was 30 years ago, and a horrific killing of Africans occurred. And my guest today was witness to some of the most terrible atrocities ever visited by human beings on other human beings. He was Deputy Force Commander and Chief of Staff of the Ghanaian Battalion in Rwanda. My guest is Major-General Henry Anyidoho, retired. General, welcome to History Time.
Thank you very much.
Before we even get into Rwanda and your time there, just paint a picture of what you were doing prior to your appointment to work with the army in Rwanda back in 93.
Well, I was the Director General Joint Operations at the General Headquarters.
What does that mean?
It means I was the senior-most staff officer who handled the policies regarding operations and plans for the whole armed forces, not only for the Army. For the Army, Navy, Air Force, I was responsible, so to say, at the General Headquarters level, where strategic plannings are done. That was my job. And as the senior-most colonel by rank at that time, I also acted for the Chief of Staff of the General Headquarters if he was away. So that was the job I was doing before going to Rwanda.
When did you have an inkling that Rwanda was going to be your next assignment?
It's a very interesting question you asked. When the Rwanda issue came, I wasn't even the one to go. The Army's choice was another colleague of mine, then Brigadier Dogwate. Unfortunately, he was unwell. At the time he was to start preparing to go, he had health problems. So that's how it became, the mantle fell on me to go to. So the initial preparations as Director General Joint Operations, I actually tasked the teams that were to go to Rwanda to carry out reconnaissance as part of the general plan that we normally go through.
And what will be reconnaissance? You'll have to go there and see.
You have to go there to see what is on the ground, pick bits and pieces of information, and then come back to help you prepare for the operation. So by then I had no clue at all that I was going to be the one to go. Others were going to go. But eventually, the Lord fell on me to go there as the contingent commander. I want to explain this. The contingent commander for the Ghanaian contingent. And when we talk about the contingent, we are talking about the formed troops that were deployed into the field. And the formed troops came from 3rd Battalion of Infantry at the time. They formed the basis of that task force. Other unit personnel joined them, but essentially 3rd Battalion of Infantry.
Where was the 3rd Battalion of Infantry
based in Sunyani.
In Sunyani.
So they had commanding officer Joseph Adinkra, Lieutenant Colonel at the time. But other units joined them. That's how we normally operate. So I was then the senior-most Ghanaian officer. That's how the appointment contingent commander of the Ghana contingent in Rwanda. But there was a battalion commander who was in direct control of the maneuver units, so to say.
So were you like the policy man, and then the other man was on the ground?
No, not necessarily a policy, but the role I played as the deputy force commander to the force commander meant also that I look after other units, not only the Ghanaian contingent.
Okay.
But the Ghanaian contingent, because I happen to be the senior-most person, serious decision-making matters were mine. The general welfare of all the troops deployed, officers and men, I had to make sure that took place. So I was playing that role whilst being the deputy to the force commander for the whole United Nations mission.
And there were other countries that were represented
Oh,
there.
yes. For example, we had a battalion from Belgium. We had a battalion from Bangladesh. They were the only three, Bangladesh, Belgium, Ghana, were the only three that provided formed troops. These were troops that were deployed into the field. Other countries that came either as military observers, or maybe they provided only communication, logistics, or something of the sort.
And was your role a peacekeeping role at that time?
Peacekeeping.
So did that mean that you were not armed? You couldn't shoot
Well,
back?
you were lightly armed because the Rwanda government at that time under Habyarimana and the Rwandese Patriotic Front, which was the force that invaded the country from Uganda, had gone to Arusha, Tanzania to negotiate an agreement. So normally when you have a signed agreement, you go in for peacekeeping force and they put a small force, lightly armed, because there is an agreement. And all that the two parties will be doing will be to follow, logically, step by step, the terms of agreement, hopefully arriving at an election.
Indeed.
Democratically organized election. That was what we were sent there for.
So tell to a civilian, what does lightly armed mean? AK-47?
Well, yes, that's the basic weapon our troops use now. We used to have other forms of weapon, less lethal. Because when you talk about heavy weapons, then you start talking about light machine guns, then you go into high trajectory weapons like the mortars and so forth. But when you say lightly armed, you are talking about a basic infantry weapon that every soldier will have. That's what we mean.
Flying into Kigali, what were the impressions that you had? What were your expectations?
Well, one of my officers had gone earlier, deployed as a military observer, and his first message that he sent to me gave a very beautiful impression about the country. So when our aircraft, we flew through Addis Ababa, when we were descending, I saw a beautiful country in real sense, with the towns or the villages located on tops of hills. You know, that's why some people describe Rwanda as a country of 1,000 hills. Very beautiful. And I think it was about evening, so the lights were on. And then I said, perhaps this may be the place that I will settle when I retire from the army. And when we finally landed, I still carried that impression with me because the weather was cool, much cooler than Ghana.
What time of the year was this?
That was in January.
Okay, of 94.
94.
The year that the trouble happened.
Exactly.
Okay. And so you've come in. Of course, this is after some confrontation between the government and the
yes
in 1990.
The Rwandese Patriotic Force had invaded the country from the north. These were essentially made up of children of Rwandese that had been driven away from their own country during previous struggles, I may call them. And they had gone to live in Rwanda for years. Uganda. And they were born there. They grew up there, went to school there, and had attained very responsible positions in the armed forces even. But like everybody else, you like to go home. So I think they had been making previous attempts to get back to Rwanda, and they were not having it easy, so they launched this invasion. And they did fight the government for a while. But then there was a sort of a truce because, as I said, they had gone to Arusha, Tanzania. Of course, during all this, when the fightings were going on, there were other people who were intervening to make sure that the fighting ended and that they should find amicable solutions to the problem. So I think with the help of Tanzania, actually, they took the lead at that time with the OAU. We hadn't come to AU then.
No.
With the
Organization of
OAU
African
also
Unity.
at the background. So that was how this agreement was signed in Arusha, Tanzania. So they agreed that they were not going to fight anymore. So the invading force was in the northern part of Rwanda, and there was a buffer zone. The government forces were to the other side. So actually, during the deployment, the Ghanaian battalion was the one that was deployed in the buffer zone.
Okay.
Yeah.
In between these two forces.
In between these two forces.
How many men were you in charge of?
Altogether,
Men and women.
Altogether, the force was 2,548. I think that was the mission as a whole. Ghana was required to provide 800 man battalion. That was, and Belgium, not quite 800, but was a better equipped battalion. And Bangladesh, about the same 800. And they were required even to provide an engineering unit. Bangladesh was then coming into peacekeeping operations for the very first time. Something we had been doing for a very long time. Yes. So that was it.
Did the Ghanaian public have any, what kind of awareness did the Ghanaian public have about what was happening in Rwanda in 1994?
Virtually nothing. No idea. I myself had to pull an encyclopedia when I was writing the initial instructions for the reconnaissance team. I had to pull an encyclopedia to first of all study the country, Rwanda. Then I studied Burundi alongside. And there was a Dutch gentleman here in this country who happened to be an honorary ambassador,
like a consul?
A consul to Rwanda in Ghana. I happened to come across him, and he actually gave me very detailed briefing. So I used that one in writing my instructions for the team that went for the record, because he knew Rwanda very well, including weather, the people's attitude, everything. He also had a background to the conflict, one way or the other. But I myself, I didn't know much about Rwanda, to be honest.
So you brought yourself up to speed with this information?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before going there. And so for the country as a whole, no. I think very little knowledge.
So between January, when you touched down, and April 6, when the conflict was sparked by this plane crash, and I'll get to that later, what was a normal day like for you?
Very busy trying to study the situation, looking at it from operational point of view, visiting locations of troops, visiting the government forces and the Rwandese Patriotic Front, talking to their leadership, because these were the people I was going to work with. And on UN missions, the force commander actually does more of a diplomatic work. He's busy talking to politicians, to government officials, the leadership of the warring factions or the parties at conflict. But the day-to-day administration of the troops, how they performed, was that of the force commander. That was mine.
That was your headache.
Yes.
So General Dallaire, the Canadian force commander, was doing all the political talk and diplomatic talk.
And my job was to make sure that the troops deployed in the field did their job well, and they submitted reports to us, which we finally submitted to New York. I wasn't the final authority as to what went to New York. I had to coordinate all that. That was why there was a need for a chief of staff. Normally, he will be coordinating that, bring it to me to look at before going to the force commander. But as the mission was established, they established it on, what should I say, a very small budget. The UN system, that there was no money, so they actually thought the mission was going to be an easier one to handle. That's why they put the troop level also very low, 2,548 for UN. That was a small mission.
What would have been an optimal figure?
If they had done the assessment well, we would have been about 7,000 for that mission. As we looked at it later on, after the problem started, then we would have been more boots on the ground, and then you'll be able to do more. But even these 2,548 I talk about, we hadn't finished deploying all of them before April 1994. We were still busy deploying.
So it was a stressful period.
Yes.
And you were handling both Deputy Force Commander and Chief
The
of
Chief of Staff
duties
at the same time.
What was the morale of the formed troops before April 6, 1994?
Well, you just have to make sure that you work hard to make sure that their morale was high, because nothing had happened then anyway to lower their morale. But you wanted to be sure that administratively they were well established. They had food to eat, they had water, their clothing was okay. Before, they were just coming in. So there weren't too many things that you had to worry about, because they are required even to bring some of these logistics items themselves to the mission area. But what was most worrying, was that we had no blood bank.
Oh, in case of injuries?
Exactly. And when you have troops deployed in the field, that's one of the very first things you want to make sure you have a functioning hospital. There is a blood bank, at least somebody gets injured, you can help him to stay alive. We didn't have any of these things in place. And maintenance of vehicles was also very poor. We didn't have the Bangladeshi battalion that was providing the logistics element hadn't brought any of these things that would help them to do the job as they were expected to do. So engineering elements were also missing. And these were the disturbing aspects. So when the April event that we shall be coming to happened, drinking water even was a problem.
Became a problem.
And the first time they brought pallets from the aircraft from Kenya for us for drinking water, it was Tusker beer. They loaded the wrong item for coming to. So
did the soldiers drink it?
That was what was available. But beer can never replace
water. No,
so,
at all. I'm just curious, before we talk about the plane crash that ignited this genocide, you talk about logistics, equipment, vehicles.
Yeah.
Who was responsible for providing that? Is it the countries that sent the battalions, or the United Nations?
The United Nations was to give this support. And sadly enough, the vehicles that were to come to us were coming from Cambodia. The Cambodia mission was then closing. And majority of these logistics items were to come from Cambodia and the failed mission in Somalia. And Rwanda is a landlocked country. So to transport these things all the way to a country with a seaport before coming overland to us alone was a challenge. The UN was. The countries were to come with limited number of items that were to keep them going for now. Belgium did that. They came with their vehicles. So they didn't have too much problem as Bangladesh and Ghana. Yes.
So now let's fast forward to April 6th. It's a big day for Rwanda because on that day, a plane crashed. Who was on that plane, and was it a crash or was it shot down?
That's a big question. The world is still trying to find out because many inquiries have been set up. I haven't heard of the final position of all these inquiries, whether the plane was shot down and who shot it down, or it was. Certainly, something happened.
The plane came down.
The plane came down. The plane was on its final approach to landing.
Where was it coming from?
It was coming from Tanzania. The president of the country, Rwanda, Habyarimana, had gone around all the country, the Great Lakes region countries, trying to seek, I think, support for the Arusha agreement to go through. Because after they came from Arusha and started implementing the agreement, it was the government side that started introducing new clauses into the agreement.
In contravention of the agreement that was set up.
And of course, the Rwandese Patriotic Front was not going to agree on that. So each time they met, they spoke, they went over, we were represented by the political side of the mission.
Mm-hmm.
We never achieved any result. Sometimes meetings took place up to about the morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning. Nothing was achieved.
What do you think was happening? Why was the government stalling or introducing new
They must have some, perhaps after the agreement, found out that they lost at what perhaps they had agreed upon, or the radical elements of the government that didn't really want peace to come. In all political systems, you have different types of people.
Indeed. Hawks and doves.
Exactly. Yeah. So the radical elements perhaps never really wanted their own countrymen who had lived in Rwanda for a long time to come back home. But they were not in a position to say so because they had an invading force that was determined and strong enough. And therefore, perhaps some of them unwillingly accepted. And after efforts were being made to implement the agreement, then they started introducing all these difficulties into the discussions. And of course, the other side was not going to agree. They were politically very well informed. Yes.
And so this plane crashes, and the people on the plane are the country's president. Who else is on the plane?
The president of Burundi was also
a neighboring country.
Exactly.
And some ministers.
Yes.
When did you hear about this plane crash?
Well, I'll say this. I think that day, Ghana, our Black Stars were playing a game somewhere. I think this African Cup series.
Yes, 94.
And I was in my hotel room watching the game, getting very disappointed because we were not winning the game.
It's a normal feeling for Black Stars.
So then I got a telephone call from the force commander.
General Delay.
Delay. We all knew that the president had traveled outside the country. And he said he heard a loud noise from the direction of the airport. So he ordered me to go to the office. Whilst he went around a government official to find out what was happening. So that ended my football game, everything. And I called my AD camp, my driver, everybody who was working with me, to get ready for us to go to the office. So we dressed up, got to the vehicle. By the time we stepped to the road, there were already roadblocks in position. Roadblocks were set up by some human beings looking very wild with machetes and everything, obviously looking for people, searching for some people, obviously. So it was not very easy. We had to make a sort of a circuitous type of movement. Our office to the hotel, very short distance, but we couldn't take that direct route because it was blocked. So we went round.
Were your cars marked clearly?
Oh, yes,
the
UN.
blue UN, white
exactly.
UN.
And I had an American staff officer with me in my vehicle. And this also we had a problem. At the two of the roadblocks, they wanted to get him out of the vehicle. And I had to tell them they had no right to do that. They would have killed him. Because then the whole country, everybody who was sort of a militia, they were suspicious of the fact that some people had ganged up against them.
And brought the plane down.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then the death of the president meant the end of everything so far as they were concerned. And so they were just going to kill anybody they suspected. But I didn't allow them, of course, to take this.
How did you negotiate your way out of that?
Well, if I want to tell you the skills of doing that, we may be spending some time. But the truth is, I told them in no uncertain terms that I was not going to do that. He was part of my team. And if they were going to allow me to go through, he was going to go with me. That was why he was in the vehicle with me. Finally, they understood. So it was just hard negotiation. And we went to the office anyway. And I made sure that I got that American out of Rwanda at the least opportunity. When we started evacuating some of the UN staff, because the civilians are not allowed to stay during certain periods. I made sure he went away immediately. Because then news started coming, they were suspecting the French. Well, they were not going to, at a distance, know the difference between how a French
whiteness will look like. Yeah,
and,
yeah.
So I sent him away. And then another lady, they were the only two whites who were my direct staff. I didn't want them to be there and become a problem, a target. So they went away. So we got to the office, and the first commander was going around. Then he informed me that, look, Henry, I think we've got a problem. It's the president's plane that crashed. So what do we do? The president's plane crashed, so he died. Then you were in trouble, obviously. So we sent messages out to all our locations. Warning orders went out to everybody as to what was happening, because they had to adopt emergency situation by the rules that we put in place. They had to be alert, to be ready for the unexpected to happen. So we continued doing that until daybreak. Then we found out that our Belgian soldiers that we had deployed into the house of the Prime Minister could not be found. And they were 10. They were deployed there with Ghanaians and I think a Togolese military observer. It's been some time now, so certain things might not still be. But they didn't kill. These other people were not missing. The Togolese and the Ghanaians were not missing. But we couldn't find the Belgians. So that became a problem. The first commander was going around trying to locate them. Eventually, he found them at the medical facility of the where the Bangladeshi people were going to be using as their base. It's called King Faisal Hospital, built for them by the Libyan government at the time.
Gaddafi.
And these boys had died. They had killed them. They killed all of them. Of course, then that became a problem. Not only that, we were all in a serious danger, but we had lost 10 of our men very rapidly in the morning. This message got to Belgium, and the Belgian foreign minister actually went around with a propaganda to close the UN mission completely because of the loss of those lives. There was total confusion. We couldn't believe what we were seeing, actually. The killings of people, dead bodies were lying in the streets here and there, everywhere you
So soon after that,
soon after that, it was like, it was a planned thing and was rehearsed. That if something should happen to the president, this is what we shall do.
Who do you think was doing the killing at that time?
It was not very clear, but earlier information, intelligence that we had, we knew that there was this stubborn militia in town.
Yes.
That probably, because we also got some information that they were also training to bring some havoc.
Would this be the Interahamwe?
Interahamwe. And obviously, it was proved that they were the ones doing the killing.
And they were on the government side?
They were on the government side. It was a government militia.
Quite apart from soldiers, quite apart from gendarmes, this is like a trained force.
Exactly. And we had an earlier information about this militia. So our plan then was to search the city of Kigali, because it was also declared as a weapon-free zone. Of course, we didn't get approval from the UN to carry out that coordinate search. Perhaps if we had done it, we could have at least reduced the number of these tools that they were hiding.
What kind of tools were they using? In these
well,
killings?
you'll be seeing some of them soon. Blunt tools. If they were to use weapons, perhaps the manner in which they were killing the people would not have been so painful, like using machetes, blunt tools, some of them stuck with nails and so forth. Anything that could hurt their opponent, so to say. It was not very good at all.
Was this an ethnic fight?
That was what it turned out to look like, that actually the Tutsis and the moderate Hutus, those who wanted peace to come, became the targets, because the prime minister, for example, Agatha Wirijimana, was a Hutu.
The lady.
The lady. But they abducted her also. In fact, it was in her house that the Belgians were deployed. These Belgians who were killed. It was in her house. She was killed. The daughter was rescued, the two daughters, they were rescued by a Senegalese captain who was able to at least rescue those two children who we eventually sent outside the country. So it was a militia that was solely responsible for all those dastardly acts. Sadly enough, in previous conflicts, those who felt threatened rushed into chapels and they were spared. This time around, when they went to the chapel, they still went, they secreted those chapels, killed the people there.
People were killed in chapels.
And you must have learned from the news media that some priests were even involved in this dastardly act.
When you close your eyes and remember some of these scenes, what do you see? I mean, what really shocked you about the killings that took place?
The human beings killing each other, especially people of the same country who even had intermarriages. When we got there, you couldn't see that sign of hatred openly. But we were getting news from time to time that there was an ambush at a tea plantation, X and Y got killed. There was this here and there. But it didn't really occur to us because life in Kigali seemed to be normal. People were going to restaurants, coming out. They were going to swimming pools. They were doing this and that. But behind the scene, this was why sometimes during some of my presentations, I told people that I think the UN, or for that matter, the international community, those who carried out the studies before deploying troops to Rwanda did really not know how deep the problem was. They scratched it on the surface. And that's why they put the small force also in place, because if they had done very detailed study of the situation, they would have perhaps noticed that even though things seemed quiet on the surface, and the fact that there had been a force invading the country because of same atrocities committed against their people earlier on, in earlier years, then they should have known that maybe things were not going to be easy. They would have put enough troops there, armed them adequately. Presently in the DRC, there is a force we call the International Intervention Brigade. They are armed to the teeth. They use all sort of armament.
A UN?
The UN,
force? Okay.
Part of the UN force there. But it's a special unit set up called Intervention Brigade.
And it's armed?
Yes, armed. To be able to resist or combat whatever, counteract whatever the enemy.
And you think these are possibly lessons learned from the failures of Rwanda?
What we went through.
Why did the UN decide to pull out of Rwanda in the thick of what was unfolding as a genocide?
Because of the loss of the Belgians. As I told you earlier on, the Belgian Foreign Affairs Minister was going around campaigning to the Security Council that they should close the mission. Because when the fighting, the plane dropped, people died, they started killing people, we started negotiations. I represented the force at Arusha, Tanzania. We couldn't have any breakthrough. So he was using that as a reason that once people were not willing to have a ceasefire, then there was no point in continuing there. But indeed, if we had all left, they would have just killed any human being that was left in Rwanda at the time.
So the UN pulled out. How long did it take
the UN passed a resolution to reduce
the force. Okay.
To virtually its shadow. Of course, we kept a figure beyond what the UN, because we realized that if we wanted to comply with their instructions, we were not going to survive.
You were disregarding an order.
Yes. We did so that if at the end of it we were questioned, we will term it an unlawful order. The first time, I think, in the history of the UN that some commanders had disobeyed UN orders. We did. We knew that we were disobeying their orders, but we did.
When you disobeyed this order, I believe you disobeyed first and then reported to Accra second.
No, for the Accra one, it was the decision to stay.
Ghana backed you to stay.
For Ghana to stay, I had told my commander, first commander, when he said, Henry, here we are. Belgium is pulling out. Bangladesh also wants to go. What about your troops? Then I said, well, for Ghana, we are not going anywhere. We will stay here. But when I said it, I knew that I didn't have that authority. We had to get it from back home. So I sent a message home that this was the situation.
Who was the recipient of this message?
To the Minister of Defense. That was my line of communication.
That would have been
so
at that time.
So I sent it to Army.
Okay.
Army will then contact the Chief of Defense Staff. And the Chief of Defense Staff will then take it to the Minister. And then, because we had entered whatever you call it, a democratic government system.
Yeah, just about 2 years. Yeah.
And then they had to go to the Council of Courts, to the government for approval. Fortunately, a reply came that I was the one on the ground as the senior most person. If that was my decision, then we should stay.
Which meant they had confidence in your argument.
Yes, if it had been otherwise, that they said that we should come back, it would have been very shameful, very regretful that we pulled out of the place because killing was going on. Certainly, we were not sent there to stop killing per se. We were sent there hoping that it was going to be a peaceful transition.
Peacekeeping, yeah.
Exactly. But I couldn't see us. More so, the challenge was that Ghana was the only African country. Bangladesh from Asia, then Belgium from Europe.
Yeah.
So were we going to abandon other Africans in time of difficulty? The answer was no.
What was the reaction of your troops who would have seen Belgium departing, would have seen Bangladesh go, and probably would start asking, Chief, sir, why are we still here?
Quite a number of them were terrified, like any human being. If anybody said he was not scared, it was not true. But
were you scared?
Yes, but it was leadership. We were in time of tragedy, and the commander should not be seen to be scared. So you pretended as if nothing was happening, because if the troops should notice in your face that you were shaky, then the game was lost.
So a good commander has to be a good actor.
You have to behave as if nothing really. So I said, well, I called a meeting, like a town hall at the airport, at the basement. I said, this was what was happening. Other countries were pulling, but I had decided that we were not going to go. But before then, I called the commanding officer. General Dikrai was a lieutenant colonel, to my office. I said, Joe, this is where we are. We came for peacekeeping mission. Others are pulling out, but I have decided that we are going to stay. What is your position? Go and think about it and come back and tell me. He says, sir, you are the senior person. If you say we are staying, we are staying. I don't need to go and think about it. If you say that we are staying, then we are staying.
On the spot?
On the spot. Total loyalty in terms of military command when you are in very tragic situation. He didn't argue with me. He didn't try to go and instigate anybody against my authority, but said, if you say we are staying, then we will stay. Of course, the burden is on me. The burden was on me. But whilst all these things were going on, the negative elements were going around, and they started fomenting trouble because people were dying. It's not easy to be seeing human beings. And I remember that one of the officers came to ask me one morning whether I thought it was still, I can't remember the exact word he used, but was it actually meaningful or sensible for us to continue staying when everybody had gone and we were not obtaining ceasefire and people were dying? And I simply said, you heard me clearly when I said we were not going to leave. If you want to go, just put in an application as an individual to me why you want to leave. I had already done the same thing. I told the commanding officer who told me that some of the boys were going around trying to instigate. And I said, Joe, let's apply simple administrative procedure. Put up an interview. I mean, allow them to come to your interview. One by one, those who would like to go home. Then you bring them to me as the appropriate superior authority. Those who will pass your desk, let them come to me to confirm to me also why they want to go. At the end of the interview, only 2 of them were brought to me. All those who were agitating, only 2 of them were brought to me. And when the 2 came, one of them said he was not feeling very well at home when
he was deployed.
He was deployed. I said, so did you pass medical exam? He said, yes, sir. I said, then you were well. So the RSM said, you are lying, you are lying. Took him out of the office. You have seen a typical RSM at an interview.
Yeah, very gruff.
I mean, so he brought the second one in. The second one said, sir, as for me, I'm just afraid.
Oh, honest guy.
Yeah. But now I know that if I go back home, I will be a disgrace to my unit. So I will stay. I said, look, you are my friend. You know I'm also afraid. Everybody here is afraid because they are killing people.
Exactly.
Weapons are firing. If anybody tells you that it's not afraid,
nice.
It's not true. But we have a job to do. This is our professional calling. And I can assure you that we are not going to die here. We are not all going to die. We will go home. Do you believe in me? He said, yes, sir. That's okay. Then let's get on with the job. So it got to a stage where one of the sergeants went to Kanadikra. Then, now he retired as a general. I said, they've seen me going out too often. And I was in we call a soft skin vehicle.
Without protection.
Exactly. And that he was worried that if I should die, then that was the end of all of them. So he should come and ask me why I was doing that. But he had seen me every time I was. So the CEO came to ask me and I said, CEO, tell him that that's what I needed to do to give them confidence. If I was hiding in my office and we were sending them out, it will not be the right thing. So immediately we instituted a policy. If you were sending 3 soldiers out, there should be a commission officer with them. If there were 10 commission officers, so that the soldiers will not think we are hiding and sending them in the harm's way.
Yeah.
That way, total confidence. That we were all in it together.
Yeah.
So all of us, then we just developed some tough skin down the road as if we were never going to die. That was the belief. So we became comrades, true comrades.
But the smell of death was around all the time.
Everywhere. You have to drive through. If you visited the internally displaced people's camp, sometimes you have to jump over the dead body in order to get to another group of people. They were there. Who was going to clear them? That was not the priority. You were trying to reach those who were still alive.
I can imagine dogs and...
Peeling when I came back from Rwanda, it took me some time to be able to chew meat, you know. It was not... And I remember when I was talking to a religious group, soon after we came back, at one stage I almost broke down because then the things started. Now we are talking about 30 years, but some of the things are coming back to me. It was not good. Human beings killing other human beings, not other human beings, their own nationals.
Speak the same language.
The same language. Had intermarriages. It was unbelievable. I couldn't understand the type of hatred. In any case, they are doing everything now back in Rwanda to overcome it.
What were those internally displaced camps like?
They were dotted all over the place. One of them was at the stadium close to our headquarters. Another one was, some of them were in hotels. Some of them were in former hospitals. Anywhere they felt they could have some sort of protection. The airport, because our Ghanaian troops were there. Once they saw there was a UN presence, that was their only hope. If there was no UN presence, they would not go there. So those were the ones we called the internally displaced. Those who couldn't get across the borders to seek shelter and that's why we look after them. Some of them were in our headquarters. And we didn't even have reserve ration.
Food.
It was not only water, we didn't have reserve ration. What we had, Gary, which we had sent there from, because the Ghanaian battalion was just arriving, with some hard cabin biscuit. Those were the only things we had. So we shared those things with the internal, yes. With the BBC journalists, those who were we all shared the same thing.
It's in hard cabin biscuits.
Yes. Those were the only things available.
With Gary?
Yes. And you had to chew it. That was what was available. To keep you going for now. Until sometime when the situation normalized, then resupply flights could bring things to us from Nairobi, Kenya.
You said earlier that you promised that young soldier that you were going to make it out alive. Did you lose any men, though?
Yes, we did. As recorded in my Guns Over Kigali, we did lose some people. Some through action from those who were opposing sides, who were fighting. Some through sickness. Not only Ghana. Some other UN troops also, we lost them.
As a commanding an officer, what goes through your mind when you are informed that you've lost one of your men?
Very challenging situation. The first one we lost, Ghana, was a lance corporal, Mesa Bedu. I will never forget his name. I had just come from Arusha, Tanzania, when I was told that he was killed. A shell had dropped at the stadium, his company location, and even though he had a protection, at the fragment went straight through his side here, where he had lesser armor, and went straight through his heart, and he died instantly.
Wow.
I got the news in Nairobi before I flew in. And I had to very quickly go around the troop locations, trying to calm them down. Because this one died in their full view. No, let's carry on. This is a challenge to us. It's our profession. A professional challenge. So let's face it.
What emotions did you read on the faces of your men?
Well, I mean, even if they were afraid, they had to take some sort of courage, strength from you. So I said, we are not going to lose any more men. You understand? As you were saying that, you hope that next moment, another one will not die. And that Mesa Bedu's case stayed with me. I would say, even till today. Because when we came back from Rwanda, I went to 3rd Battalion of Infantry. Because I happened to be posted to be the commander of the Northern Command, then 2nd Infantry Brigade. And 3rd Battalion was directly under my command. When I visited the unit, I saw the wife with a small child, a child that must have been in the tummy when the father was killed in Rwanda, and killed on my orders. Because if I had said we should also all go away, perhaps Mesa Bedu would not have died. I couldn't look at the wife's face twice. These are some of the command challenges you face. But again and again, I had to ask myself whether what I did was right. And my conscience kept on telling me that, yeah, that was the right thing to do. We couldn't run away. I mean, I wouldn't know what I would have told people at Kotoka International Airport if they came to meet us. And then my only reason was that we went for peacekeeping operations that turned out to war situations, so I have brought the troops back. I couldn't say that. Professionally, it will be belittling. I couldn't take it. But I thank God that we didn't lose too many men. And whatever we did together as a team. As the situation worsened, so did we become so closely linked. We were in it together. From the private soldier all the way up to my level, we were all doing the same thing. And that was how we survived. God looked after us.
I can imagine the conditions were quite tough. I mean, did you have the luxury of a shower?
That's a great question. Initially, when we didn't even have water to drink, you will not think about shower. I remember when they managed to fly in Voltic drinking water for her. If you had 1 bottle of water, you were lucky you had 2. Then you manage to maybe use a face towel to pour some of the water on it, clean your private parts, and use maybe some dusting powder. They will always give you the food powder and all those things before going on operations to keep yourself a little clean. Those we had the problem with were the smokers. The smokers with sweat and without washing. They were a great challenge too.
It's a lethal combination. Huh?
But again, we had to live.
Did you smoke?
No, at all. But I remember one day telling them at operational briefing that the smokers should know that the fume coming from. Then my first commander, Henry, are you referring to me? I said, because this smokes quite a bit, cigar, you know. But we managed.
So in the midst of all the horror and the terror and the carnage, there must have been some light moments as well. Were there any?
Not during the real genocide. None. No, none.
It was just tension and stress every day?
All the time. And people were falling sick. And if we noticed that you could not take it anymore, we evacuated you to Nairobi. And those also wounded were evacuated to Nairobi. There is one warrant officer they call Ajare, Samson Ajare. I think I reflected on him in my book. He was so badly wounded.
What were his injuries? What happened to him?
A shell. They fired a bomb, it exploded.
Close to him.
And he got so badly hurt. And I went in to see him at Nairobi hospital. After some treatment, he was brought back to the mission. We had the Australians had then come in with their medical support. And I went to visit him one morning. He said, sir, these people, they are planning to cut my leg. I said, what? Which people? Nobody is going to cut your leg. Not when I'm here. He said, that's what they've been discussing. My type of soldier, I like the way he spoke to me. So I said, nobody is going to cut your leg. No amputation here. If they cannot do it anymore, we send you outside. Immediately, I got on the phone. I spoke to now late Brigadier Agbeve, who was our defense advisor. And we flew this guy to London, and they saved his leg.
You saved his leg? Wow.
He walks now with a loss in the range of one of the legs. But
it's there.
He came back to serve again as a soldier. He was a corporal at the time, but he retired as a warrant officer, class 2. And we are in close communication. Sometimes if I go to deliver lecture at Kofi Annan or Staff College, I take him along. For people just to see him.
Exactly.
The type of sacrifice you can make if you are in the military. So we are closely related. Those of us who served in Rwanda during the crisis till today, those who are still alive.
You still link up?
Yes. The bond of relationship is so strong. Because at one time you would have died together.
Indeed. Indeed. Was there a day where you felt, man, this is the end? I'm gone?
Yes. Because there was one day after evening briefing, I went to my room. And my room doubled for my sleeping place too, my office. And just as I got down to lie down, I heard strong noise, which means a bomb had landed in our headquarters.
They were firing into your headquarters?
Whether they were doing it deliberately or by mistake, we don't know. And the shrapnel from that bomb had passed through the window of my one of my staff officers, a Navy officer he was, but he was serving me at that time, and had actually got to my room. In fact, if I were seated, nobody knows what. That's why I say God's hands were always following us. And that man too, they used to meet in his office almost every evening, the Ghanaian officers at the headquarters. Fortunately, they were not there. So the near misses, the Senegalese officer whom I said served the children of the prime minister, he died out of this same bomb explosion. The roadblock at which he died, my driver Novihu and I had passed there barely 10 minutes. The same roadblock. When he also got there, he was stopped, and whilst they were questioning him, the bomb fell. If he had not been the act of God, so then what?
Did you find yourself talking to God a lot during this conflict?
We were
back then?
we were doing that personally, and if you had a little chance to remember, they deploy chaplains with every mission. So sometimes the chaplain will come to you at dawn, if it was possible, to say prayers with you. In fact, to the extent that the soldiers will be asking the boys who are close to you, that your old man, why is he still going around like that? Are you sure
he's okay?
He doesn't have anything which is offering you personal protection?
Oh, they thought you were fortified.
Exactly. So my cook, who was from somewhere near Tafo.
Okay.
What have I forgotten the name of this town? A Navy officer. The Navy, they have the best cook. So when you are going on operation,
good food, eh?
You try to take
a Navy person.
Yes. You know, so he told them that he was sweeping. He was the one sweeping my bedroom every day. He had never seen anything. If I had anything to hide, it would be my bedroom.
Under your bed or something.
Yeah, he didn't see anything. But we prayed before going to work in the mornings. And the chaplain will come to your house. That's when things started slowing down a little bit. And say prayers together with you. And he was doing the same thing to troops in their location. But in the actual heat, the genocide, who will move to some? No, where you are, you have to make sure that
you are secure.
Exactly. Except those of us in command, making sure that the boys were doing their work. If they didn't see your face, they couldn't continue working like that.
They had to be inspired.
Exactly.
And motivated. How long were your days? I mean, how much sleep were you getting on a daily in the thick of this genocide?
Well, the troops even went around with information that I was a very wonderful person. I never slept. But they didn't know that each time we had a briefing. And we were briefing so many times in the heat of... And immediately I got to my office, I locked the door. And I told my AD camp, look, I'm going to take a rest for a short while. Don't let anybody come in. Fortunately, by nature, I sleep for a very short period. And when I get down, I don't have a problem in sleeping. So I'll rest a little bit, get up, and then they will see me going around. So they then had the impression that I was not sleeping.
You're not sleeping.
Now you will go crazy if you don't sleep at all.
Sleep is critical. When did you know that the tide was turning and the killings were reducing? I mean, everything started on the 6th of April.
Yeah.
When did you feel that, listen, this thing is coming down?
It was when the invading force was gaining the upper hand. The Rwandese Patriotic Front. They had the Rwandese Patriotic Army. They still have it today.
Okay.
The political organization is called Front. Then the army. They were winning.
That's Mr. Kagame, President
Kagame's group. They were winning. They were gaining ground. So everywhere they conquered, then there was relative peace. You understand what I mean? The government forces were just rolling away in front of them. They were running away.
Who was better equipped?
Oh, of course, the government forces would have had the weapons and all that. It's not, weapons don't fire themselves. It's the men behind the weapons. They were not courageous enough. They didn't have good morale. They didn't perhaps know the reason why they should be fighting.
This is the government side.
Yes, but the other guys knew why they were fighting.
I understand from your book that they were not even paid, but they were motivated.
They were motivated. They wanted to get back home. But the government troops, when we got there, they will be served even with beer at their checkpoints. So as part of their ration.
Beer?
And we knew then that if there should be a serious escalation, they were not going to survive. They didn't look real military to us.
You mean soldiers were drinking beer at checkpoints?
Oh, they distributed this to us as part of their ration. So if they had food supply coming in, beer also accompanied. And we saw them on many occasions. It's not a derogatory statement, but many people witnessed it. Their training was not hard enough for them to stand the type of force that was invading. And I stated in my book also that the Rwandese Patriotic Army, they man-packed their logistics items and their weapons.
What does that mean?
Well, you carry everything on a human being. And that was what was used in the Second World War. And people were saying that the modern warfare, you don't pack your equipment, but they packed everything.
So you carried
They
your
carried
supplies
whatever, their weapons, their food, their ammunition. That was what they did to come to Kigali.
So almost like a really well-trained guerrilla force.
Exactly. That's what they were. Even when there was a truce and there was this the militarized zone, they were still training. The first time I visited General Kagame, when my helicopter landed, I saw them doing real hard physical training.
They were training?
Yeah, before I was escorted to meet him in his small hut where he was staying. And that's how our relationship started.
What's he like? What's General Kagame like?
Very calm, quiet person, but strong inside. Because he told me that our first meeting, that he was prepared to go by the Arusha Peace Agreement, but if the government was going to play around, whatever it would take them to regain their independence, to get back home, they were going to do it. They were prepared to sacrifice to get part of the government administration. They were prepared to get to Kigali. There should be no mistake in that. He made this plain to me. And when I came back, I told my first commander that was what the commander told me. Very calm, quiet looking, but he has a lot of self-discipline. And the determination in him is so strong. That's how I found him. And that's how the war was fought. The leadership was good, very firm, and I think provided the troops with what they needed to fight.
So from...
but he was also from a good training background, though. I believe he was in the Uganda. He didn't tell me this. But from my own information, he was already a major in the Ugandan army and was, I think, in their military intelligence unit.
So well-trained.
Well-trained, and had even gone to staff college in America. He was there when he was recalled to come and lead the invading troops because their leader had been killed.
When you say staff, what is the significance of a soldier going to a staff college?
Officers do that as a training to finally get them ready to take command position, command and senior staff positions.
Okay.
The only one you can do after staff college is to go to war college. And that place you meet civilians. Civilian administrators and other people come there. Then they are discussing national policy strategically. That's what they are finally coming to bring to Ghana. Now, we had attempted it earlier. Why we did not establish it as of today, I cannot understand. Because they are still trying to use the staff college facility now, which you could have done at that time. Nigeria and Ghana established staff college the same year. Nigeria had since established war college many years ago, which we were attending. I didn't see why we could not.
But hopefully
I'm told they are.
It's going to come through.
Because I interact with them often, I get some of this information. Anytime I go there on invitation to deliver, make a presentation, yes.
Back to the genocide, and when I look at the numbers in whatever sources I read from, they say between 800,000 and 1 million people in 3 months. I mean, I can't even wrap my head around the number of people who were killed.
It's just because the number of people that were killed were too many. It was like slaughtering them. I'm not too sure anybody went counting one by one, but the mass killing at various places, so one could estimate that. And since that was the figure that was mentioned from international sources from the very beginning, all documents stuck to that. They killed far too many people.
You maintain that this was a very preventable war?
Yes. It's a very preventable genocide if the world had stood up for its own obligations or challenges. Why? The UN Security Council has a primary responsibility for security all over the world. They established the United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda and sent us there. How will the same organization decide to reduce the force when we had entered into crisis? The normal practice is when you're in crisis, you increase the force. You don't reduce it. So that was one. Two, African Union, then OAU, was not too far away from Kigali.
Mm-hmm.
What did they do? Nothing. It was after Rwanda that they started talking about African Standby Brigade. As of today, the brigade is still not in position.
Still not in position?
No.
It means they haven't learned anything from Rwanda.
Well, they thought they were going to put one there, but they were never able to do it. What they did was they asked the sub-regional, like ECOWAS,
mm-hmm.
to establish their own way of combating this type of situation. I would say for trial purposes, ECOWAS has rather done well. Because, you know, we went to Liberia.
Yes, indeed.
We went to Sierra Leone. I think Guinea-Bissau. We sacked also Yaya Jammeh. When I say we, I'm referring to the ECOWAS military, yes. Together with the political elements. So the other African sub-regions have also been trying to do the same thing. You know, Southern African Development Corporation, SADC, has been trying to do something about the Congo situation, about Botswana, and whatever, this Mozambique problem going on. By the way, you know that even Rwanda sent troops to Mozambique.
Really?
Yes. Mm. The good thing about Rwanda, after what they suffered, it didn't take them a long time at all to start participating in UN peacekeeping missions all over the world.
Because they know.
They saw it. Mm-hmm. So if the determination were there on the part of countries, our heads of state, this thing could have been stopped. But the UN itself did not stand up to its obligation.
Around that time, too, the Balkan crisis was on.
Yes, and they were more focused there. But so who really cared about a small country in East Central Africa that didn't have gold, that didn't have oil? You know, so people were not even willing to provide troops for the peacekeeping.
And some would say that the protagonists and antagonists were all black people.
You know, they didn't care. And more so, sometimes I say our mission was an orphan mission to Somalia because the UN the world had failed at Somalia. There was this shooting down of the Black Hawk helicopter, and American troops were dragged in the streets, and this was shown on television screens. So the Americans, the Europeans, you know, they thought these Africans, they are not people who should go to their aid or something.
So they pulled out.
They were not interested. So we had to do it ourselves. So logistically, we didn't have the means. Troops to come to the mission, nobody will provide. That was how Bangladesh, for example, came in. That was the first time they entered into peacekeeping operations. They were coming to practice, like we all entered the first time anyway. But they were not prepared. A unit coming into, or country coming into peacekeeping operation for the first time and being given the responsibility for providing logistics, it was a mistake.
30 years on from those terrible months that you spent in Rwanda as Deputy Force Commander and Chief of Staff.
Yes.
You've had a chance to go back a couple of times.
Yes, to Rwanda.
To Rwanda?
Yes, I did.
What has surprised you?
First of all, I went, I think, after the 5th year, when they were having their anniversary. They invited me, and I went. I saw that they were very quickly reorganizing the country. People were coming back.
Those who fled?
Those who fled were coming back. They were encouraged to come back. So they were coming back. Those, of course, who knew they had nothing to fear. So people were coming in. And the government was busy trying to rebuild because they had looted the ministry. There was nothing left. Even a desk was not left in any of the ministries in Kigali when the government side was pulling out.
That bad?
Nothing was left. But they were busy rebuilding all this. That's what I saw. And they were busy also integrating the army. That's the rebel force that invaded together with the government side. They were busy trying to do that. Of course, we had started helping to train some of their people before we even left. The Ghanaian NCOs were doing the training.
Non-commissioned officers.
Non-commissioned officers. And we were also using a band, our military band, to train their men. In fact, when we were there in 2022, they played some of the music that our people taught them.
That's when you
for us at our social gathering.
That's when you went for to receive an award from the country.
So I went there the 5th one. Then they invited me again to participate in a panel discussion at their staff college, which they have established very quickly. They didn't have one. They have one now. And this last time in 2022, when we went for their national, that's the highest honor they bestow on anybody in their country, was what the General Dekra and I were given. And we thank God that that was the 28th year it happened. Because when General Kagame visited here, Ghana, soon after things had quietened down and they established government, he was then the vice president, the minister of defense. He visited President Rawlings, and I was with him. And President Rawlings mentioned that because General Kagame then said, we will have to call General Anyidoho back to decorate him. Then President Rawlings said, please wait until Ghana finishes. Then you can do yours. It took the Ghana government 5 years for me to get my decoration. And I think, why should Rwanda be in a hurry then to do theirs? And I couldn't understand why mine was taking such a long time, even here in Ghana.
Have you wrapped your head around that still now? I mean, do you still understand?
Well, eventually I was told that each time, because my recommendation was coming from the UN and General Delay, I was told any time the recommendation came to Army headquarters, some others wanted to add their names to it for some other things they also thought they had done courageously, but they were not in Rwanda with me.
But that's not how it works. You can't add yourself to
No. Eventually, when the President only decided to give this award, I was the only military officer during that ceremony. There were other civilians and some prison officers, but I was the only military officer with 2 warrant officers. But commissioned officers, I was the only one. And I know he must have done that on purpose. But they all sat there to watch me to get the decoration. And it was a proudest moment for me at that time, that even though it had delayed,
it's okay.
It finally happened. And this other one in Rwanda, which came after 28 years, when we went, the president said that in his speech, that there had always been the intention to do this. But why it has taken so long a time, that was not something he wanted to explain. But the good thing was that it was finally happening. But I think when we came from Rwanda, there was so much animosity.
Why?
From our own organization, from Army headquarters, towards those of us who were there. I think obviously, God help us, we had done too well that we became a threat to people's position. That's my thinking. That's the only thing I can think about. Because they didn't even ask for a briefing notes. Normally, when you come from operation, you should be debriefed. Nobody talked to us.
So do you have those notes prepared?
They will be in my archives.
And nobody has asked for the notes?
No. Before individuals started asking us to come and talk, with President Rawlings, I had gone to him in the castle. He debriefed me as a person. And one of the questions he asked me was, why did you choose to stay when everybody else was leaving? I was getting worried. Anytime I saw the television screen and the way things were happening, I was thinking that if we should all be killed, what explanation would I give to Ghanaians? Because other countries had left and you were there. Can you explain to me why you took the decision? And I said that sometimes things, it's not everything you can explain. I couldn't explain, but I just thought that it was a professional calling. And he said, thank you for doing that. You know, and that undoubtedly boosted our country's image before the world. And why our own people played down on it. And they don't seem to give it the recognition that it deserves.
You think it's professional envy?
I should think so, because even today, the Rwandese government is organizing annual events in Accra, inviting us, those of us who participated in it. It's not Ghana government, Ministry of Defense, organizing something for what happened in Rwanda. They just take it like any other peacekeeping operation. It was not any other peacekeeping operation.
Yeah, it was. Do you think it's because of the role, maybe the role that the Ghanaian media did not really take this up? Because I read from your book that Mark Doyle from the BBC was part of the press corps,
exactly,
who was reporting on this. Did we have a press
we didn't have
contingent with the gunbat,
no,
reporting back, giving us updates on what was happening?
We didn't have. Sadly enough, our own public relation group that went with us also left when they sized down on the mission, I think out of fear. They jumped onto the first aircraft and then left. So we lost that. We lost a lot of details.
Because a lot of reporting would have happened if they were there.
And it took the president to send what is his name?
Mr. Fritz Baffo.
Fritz Baffo.
Yes.
He was in the working sometime in the castle.
Yeah, indeed.
They were the first group sent to Rwanda, and it was the president himself who sent them. They didn't come from Ministry of Defense. They didn't come from Army headquarters. It was much later that the Chief of Defense Staff, then Marshal Jumasi, came. Army headquarters never sent any team to Rwanda to visit them, and it was their baby. We went under Army instructions. You know, even though it was for the whole armed forces.
It was an Army thing.
Army unit, Army thing. And the Ghana Army should have felt very proud of what we were doing to boost the image of but that wasn't the case.
So, in actual fact, your book, Guns Over Kigali, is basically one of the few official documents chronicling what happened from your perspective.
Yeah, I would imagine, except the situation reports that we sent daily. If they keep the archives,
then that will be there.
Then that will be there. But they should have interrogated me, interrogated Adinkra, because I happen to be the officer that established the International Peacekeeping Operations Office at the Ministry of Defense level. When we started, there was nothing like that. But when I came from Staff College, that was the task I was given to establish this organization, let it function. And one of the things I put there as a policy matter was all commanders coming from operations should be interrogated. They should come with their war diary and present that, and this should be kept. And their pictures, when you go to Kumasi, the military museum, you will see that they have followed that one. The pictures of all the commanders are lined up there. You will also see part of my war relics I brought from Rwanda in the museum in Kumasi.
So the war diary is your diary where you keep daily log of what you did, the significant moments of the day.
Exactly.
2 quick questions. How do the people of Rwanda perceive Ghana?
In very high, with very high, great respect. When they meet you, even one-on-one, or on my visits, the way they handled our visit, I mean, the nothing short of that dignified respect that they will have for nationals of a country.
You feel appreciated?
Very much so. If you meet them even in the field, when I left the army, I said the UN on missions in what do you call it, Darfur, and Addis Ababa, anywhere I met Rwandese. In fact, they take me like one of their nationals. We've been like that all along. And the High Commissioner just left, who worked hard for this, our decoration. The new one that came invited me for a lunch recently together with my wife. You know, so for them, we did extremely well for their country. They appreciate. Then you ask, why? What about here? The country that sent us.
Maybe a prophet is not recognized in his own home.
That might be the reason. Now we've left the army, so we don't form threat to anybody's position. So what other, except individual officers in command position, like staff college, junior and senior, they will occasionally send their students to me to come and interview me. But I think it should have been done on much higher level.
To at least keep the record.
To keep the record.
For posterity.
You know, why would they not talk to us? Had we committed any crime? You kept on asking yourself. Not only that, I didn't even have an office. When I came back, the army didn't have an office for me.
You were internally displaced.
Yes, so to say. So I stayed on in my house until my daughter one day asked me, so if somebody comes to ask us when you return from, where are you working? What shall we tell the person? In fact, I went back to my room and wept. And I came back, plucked up courage and told her that, look, just tell the person that they should come to the Minister of Defense and ask of me, they will see me there.
Indeed.
You know, so it was frustrating to my children until the elections of 1996 were coming, presidential and parliamentary elections. Now, I was at this same place you have come to, Tanyigbe, when somebody from Castle went to my house looking for me. I got back. Those days, I was annoyed with just about everybody. Then they said I should come to Castle Monday morning. It was there that I was told that I was going to Kumasi to be the brigade commander, and that General Smith was coming to be the army commander. The election was coming on. This was in September. And December was the election. And I said, well, somebody must have looked around and they were looking for some ugly face to sacrifice, because we all knew Kumasi was a very strong place to manage during elections. But when I got there, I didn't have any problem.
Not at all.
I just talked to the people. None of them ran after me.
I mean, you had come from Rwanda, you know. Kumasi would be a piece of cake.
And I spoke to them that, please don't let us try anything bad here. Burning tires in the street, destroying, please don't do it. It doesn't help. And they listened. We didn't have any problem.
When you look back on your time as Deputy Force Commander and Chief of Staff with Ganbat in Rwanda from 94 to 95, what are the key lessons that you have learned that we should not forget?
Well, before that, let me finish the other question you asked about going back to Rwanda, the things I noticed.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
They built a country. The last time I went, my wife was even surprised. The cleanliness of the country, not only the city of Kigali. Even if you travel outside,
it's beautifully clean.
You couldn't see any paper thrown up. No, nothing. And we met school children who are being taught how to live together as people of one nation. You know, when we visited the museums where the tragedy occurred, they are bringing up kids in that. Very touching.
Are they de-emphasizing the tribal and ethnic divisions?
They look at themselves as Rwandese, not as a Tutsi, not as a Hutu, and I think that's a good program. If you not witness the killing, you've not witnessed what they went through. Their progress may not be, but for me, an empty country that is now full of people with new developments, I think that's then the question you...
That after 30
years... lessons...
Yes, you're reflecting now back to that time. What lessons have stuck with you that we should never forget?
What started Rwanda's problem was poor governance. Poor governance. If those in political authority in Rwanda had allowed everybody else to participate, then those who went into exile would never have gone. Those who went to Rwanda, to Uganda, Tanzania, and others became refugees when they had a country. If there had been good governance at that time, so that is point number one. People should not take governing a country as a joke. No, it's a very serious responsibility. You have opted to look after the people. And if they give you the mandate, look after all of them. Yours is to continue promoting unity, peace, all the time. Don't do anything to derail it. Don't be asking for the wrong things. And when they have not witnessed it, I remember at one time, I said something that people were calling for fire, fire. They should stop it. Because if it starts burning, they will not be able to quench it. And they criticized me for making that statement. But they had not seen fire burning. I saw it. And I don't want anything like that to happen to Ghana at all. We should live a peaceful life with each other. And if everybody is doing his job, if the politicians and in parliament doing what we expect them to do because we elected them, if those in hospital are doing their job, like the farmers continue producing food for us to eat, the teachers are doing theirs, training people, the military is doing its job in defense of the country, the police are doing their internal police. If everyone is doing its job as will be expected to do, then we have a country to develop. This, you know, it's a beautiful country. And we have just about everything. We have a coastline. We have forests. We have savanna areas. We have rivers flowing through the country. What are we busy doing? We are busy destroying the rivers. In Rwanda, even wetland, the way they use it for agricultural purposes is amazing. And the type of things they produce. We are not serious. And I feel ashamed that somebody, a Ghanaian, who put my life at risk and that of my troops for a country that has suddenly gone up way ahead of us. When we were in Rwanda, Rwanda didn't have airline. They have airline today. When we were in Rwanda, it was Ghana Airways that flew us to Kigali. Today, we don't have an airline. What is wrong? I keep on asking myself. Why did we take the first position, but we are trying to become last? Rwanda has done a lot, and we have the resources. We have the human. Look, even their tax system. It was, I remember Labichiao and others that were taken from Ghana here to go and structure their revenue system for them. I met Labichiao there and his team. What are we doing? That's my concern. We are not moving forward. But should everybody do his job well, her job well, we don't have anything to worry about. Shall we start insulting other people? Shall we stop being tribalistic? Shall we stop being ethnic-minded? Because ethnicity was part of the problem. Shall we do the things that are important? We should emphasize the things that unite us and de-emphasize those things that separate us. That's what we should be doing.
And finally, since this is about Rwanda, remembering Rwanda, what's your message to the people of Rwanda watching you right now?
I congratulate them for what they've been able to do for themselves in the past 30 years, from 0 point to where I really feel proud of them, and I keep on telling them, well done. It's my second home, and I keep on watching your progress. I pray that God will continue to hold you up so that you never witness the horrible events that we saw in 1994-95. So well done, my fellow Rwandese, as I call them.
Indeed.
Sometimes that I'm part of them.
Indeed.
Well done, and God be with you. Thank you.
And well done, sir, for the sacrifice that you made 30 years ago. And I'm very proud of you. And may God give you more strength and more vigor to pass on the experience and knowledge that you have acquired in your very illustrious military career and your life beyond.
Thank you very much, but I accept that on behalf of my officers and men who stood by me, because alone I couldn't have done it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure.
Okay. Thank you.
So that was my chat with Major-General Henry Kwami Anyidoho, retired. He was a Deputy Force Commander and Chief of Staff of Combat from 94 to 95, witnessed unspeakable things, but ended on a note of hope for Ghanaians, for Africans, and especially for Rwandans celebrating or marking 30 years of the genocide. If you have not read his book, this is my plug for it. It's Guns Over Kigali. And it's a story of his personal account. You will enjoy it. There's a lot to learn from it. The background to the conflict, what happened, the days that unfolded, and the lessons that he drew from his time in Rwanda. Look for a copy. Look for Book Nook online, and they will make sure that you get a copy of this book. What did you find most striking about this interview? What are your high points? Put them down in the comments below, and let's continue to have a conversation about the things that matter. My name is Kafui Day, and thank you for being part of History Time. God bless.